you have you have about 20 plus years of experience in the sustainability sector and as a scientist as well, right? How did you transition from that into events?
A lot of people think that that's a strange development. Having worked as a scientist, I am very, very aware that information and education is not really how you change people's minds or influence people. As frustrated as climate scientists get
Right,
about that, that's not
right,
how humans work. Events are able to create that change in a way that doesn't feel like lecturing. Probably started legacy somewhat hastily and somewhat naively with hindsight. I made a very deliberate decision at the beginning for Legacy to be a for-profit company. You're running as a not-for-profit, you are not on the same level footing. So it's just, for me, I'm interested in wide-scale change. And so business has to change. And so I want to demonstrate that a business can do that. Turn the lights on.
yeah, that's sustainable motion sensors, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Awesome. So Arvind, let's get into it. So I was reading about your background, and you have about 20 plus years of experience in the sustainability sector and as a scientist as well, right? You sort of worked in that area. So the first question that struck me was, how did you transition from that into events? And I was really curious about that. So I wanted to know more about that. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people think that that's a strange development to move from the work I was doing before to
Yeah.
events. So I've always worked in sustainability and trying to make the world better. And I spent many years specializing in the built environment. So advising both in-house and as a consultant. So advising on how to make buildings better and cityscapes better and just general spaces where people are and buildings better sustainably and also socially. And so actually it's not such a strange turn because events are held in buildings. It's
Right.
just obviously events are temporary and
Right.
I the work I was doing was about more permanent uses. But I've always loved events. And so even within my roles working in the built environment, I'd always end up organizing the conferences and the events anyway, just as part of my role, the same way many professionals do.
Right.
When you're running projects and programs, you often have to do some stakeholder engagement or events, and I loved it.
Right.
So it just made me think, compared to the built environment, the event sector is way behind in terms of considering some of these issues.
Mm.
And um, whilst most people enjoy events, I think most people recognize that events can be quite wasteful, that they can have some negative impacts. And so I thought I'd combine some of the skills I'd learned from working in the built environment with my love of events and bring some of those skills to try and move the events industry along quicker in terms
Right.
of understanding their impact and what they can do to reduce their environmental impact. And also look at what events can do socially. We hear it a lot with big events like the Olympics, how
Mm.
events can have this really powerful legacy. And I genuinely believe that's true. I think events can be transformative. And so I thought, well, there's an opportunity here to maybe use the power of events to create that positive change and eliminate some of the negative impacts which detracts from that message.
That's actually very interesting. Is that how the name legacy events comes from? Like, just
Exactly.
okay, okay. So that's actually super interesting. So, yeah, events are definitely powerful, and they stick. They're always on the top of your mind, right? And what better way to promote sustainability than something that actually has a lot of eyeballs and stuff, people coming and attending them and having a good time. Was that sort of the intention?
Exactly. And having worked as a scientist, I am very, very aware that information and education is not really how you change people's minds or influence people. As frustrated as climate scientists get
Right,
about that, that's not
right,
how humans work. And so events are able to create that change in a way that doesn't feel like lecturing, in a way that feels much more positive and innovative in an innovative way. But how often do you hear of big events and then you hear these headlines which detract from that? So a classic example of with COP or the G7 meetups,
right,
or where major headlines before these events is all these world leaders flying to the event, so the carbon emissions involved, Sometimes there are stories about the supply chain. For example, when we had the World Cup in Qatar recently, and the headlines were dominated with issues around the supply chain and human
Right.
rights records. And so sometimes when these issues aren't considered, they detract from the message of the event. And I'm not saying that all of these issues can be solved. Sometimes they're entrenched and they're very complicated, but at least we're trying to help the event sector realize that there are things you can do to consider and reduce your environmental impact. And there are things you can do to improve the kind of social impact and be more socially responsible, which just adds to the power of your event. So that's what Legacy is there for, to do, to get rid of to reduce the negative environmental impacts and boost the social responsibility so that the power of the event shines through.
That's awesome. We'll also get into what exactly how do you actually incorporate sustainability into your events, because I know that you don't just design events, you also consult and you also help people market it and stuff. We'll get to all that fun stuff as well. But like what I'm really curious about is, so you worked in the sustainability sector for over 20 years. You have that experience and you also enjoy running events and organizing this. And what did you sort of see as the market gap? What was your critical insight which said, hey, if I combine the two, I can actually make a change and I can actually tangibly move the needle? Like, what was that process like? Because I feel there's a lot of entrepreneurs who have that idea, but then they get stuck there. They don't know how to
Yeah.
do it. So I want to understand that journey more.
I think I probably started Legacy somewhat hastily and somewhat naively with hindsight. But what was happening was I was in a professional corporate role
Yeah.
where I was working a lot of hours. It was very time consuming. And I also had reached that point in my personal and private life where I had to organize a lot of events.
Okay.
And I've always had an interest in sustainability. So I was trying to do that. And I found that a lot of the questions I was asking some of the events companies I was working with, it just felt like they did not understand what I was trying to get at or what I was trying to do. And I found that immensely frustrating because I didn't have the time to
Right,
be
right,
educating people about these questions. I just wanted to organize my event. And
right.
this was really frustrating to me and very irritating. And I just thought there's clearly a need in this industry for some knowledge around sustainability and also for to bridge that gap between people like me who need an event in the corporate world, but I'm not a professional, and then also professional event organizers, so that we're speaking the same language. So
Right.
that really was the spark, I suppose. Like a lot of um, startups, it came from a sense of pure frustration at the status quo.
Right. Did you sort of notice that corporates were more inclined to do sustainable events and the
Um,
status quo?
so
Yeah, yeah.
back
Sorry.
in back in 2016, when I started Legacy, um, I found that my clients were those who were very much bought into what I was trying to do. They understood the issue. They understood why there was a need to have sustainability considered in event planning. And then we were getting to the point where it was rising up the agenda. And so my clients then became a lot of companies that realized that they had to engage with this. It wasn't going away. It wasn't a fad.
Right,
They
right.
needed to do something about their impacts. And that trend is only going to continue, especially now as regions like the EU bring in mandatory reporting for
Right.
sustainability, for example. So I think finally people have realized and corporates have realized that they can't just keep their head in the sand and pretend this isn't happening. They have at least has changed. So my challenges now are around demonstrating how your changes can be genuine and around explaining that it's not just about reporting your carbon footprint. I think not just in events, generally there's a bit of tunnel vision
Yep.
around measuring carbon. Understandably, climate change is a catastrophe,
Right.
but we all have finite budgets and finite resource. And I'd rather people spent their resource taking action rather than reporting it, if you know what I mean, trying to work out their carbon footprint to the nth degree, to a ton of carbon, versus using that resource to actually drive action.
I love that. I love that. And so that's there's something interesting that you mentioned was initially the people who bought in back in 2016 when you first started already were inclined. They were already aware of the problem. They were inclined to take some sort of action, but they might have not necessarily been the corporates that
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, they might have not necessarily been the corporates who are kind of slow moving when it comes to these sort of trends, but these nimble companies who actually wanted to do something. So what was your journey like to get, let's say, your first 2 or 3 customers when you were sort of pitching your idea? Because I know right now you have like a whole bunch of offerings that you have, but at least I think that at that point of time you didn't have all of those offerings. You probably started with something and then you let that grow. Wanted to know that, like, what was that offering for you, and how did you get your first set of customers? What was that?
Yeah. Well, that was the benefit of having spent many years working in sustainability. I had a network already, and I also understood how big corporate procured. So I understood how to apply for public tenders, for example, and public bids. So for my first clients, I went through the public tender process with so had presumably other people applying, and was able to be successful through that public procurement process. And then I also just approached my network and said, I would like to broach this as an idea. What do you think? And then luckily my network was able to put me in touch and introduce me to various people, and it went from there. But I have to say, in the first few months of Legacy, I suppose in that's terrifying time when you've decided you're starting a business and you see the calendar stretching out empty ahead of you.
Yeah.
I was open to doing a lot of different things. So I ended up working with various startups and companies in random roles, just
Right.
to bring in some income. And
Yeah.
that was great because it opened doors in companies I probably wouldn't have known about, but it also allowed me to understand how lots and lots of different companies operated in this specific area of marketing and communications and events. Because remember, I came from science and
Yes. Exactly.
program management, and yeah, the world of marketing and all of that kind of thing was new to me. So I had to learn all that, and I still wouldn't call myself skilled or talented at it, but it was completely new to me. So doing lots of little things at the beginning, which weren't directly related to events, was helpful.
And did you have a co-founder, or did you sort of were you doing
No, I
one?
didn't have a co-founder. Like I said, I was possibly a little bit hasty and a little bit naive. So I just thought, well, I'm just going to give it a go. And I had savings as well because I'd been mulling this over in my head for a while about how I could do this. So I just launched into the world of events and was lucky quite early on to be able to be successful in bidding for some projects using the standard procurement routes.
Right. And so your first offering was, let me run a sustainable event for you end to end. Was that the first?
Yeah, and this is where luck comes in, and luck plays such a massive part of it. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm super talented at this. I was very lucky. When I first decided to launch the business, a public tender came up, and the requirement was for running events for a business network full of sustainable businesses. And so I obviously fit that niche exactly.
Right, right,
And
right.
it was just good luck that this tender came up just as I was starting to look, because I suppose I was successful because a standard events company wouldn't really understand sustainable businesses, and a
Right.
business company doesn't really know about events. And so when I popped up at the opportune time, it was the perfect contract for me, and that's really where it all snowballed from there. So I
Right.
was very fortunate. And I think, well, you'll know because you speak to entrepreneurs all the time, there's a quite large amount of luck involved with this
Yeah,
and
that is
timing.
that is so true. And I'm just like really appreciative that you also like a lot of founders like to say that it was all me, I because just through force of will I sort of got stuff to happen. And obviously there's a lot of it, but there are some things that happen at the right the importance of time, I think, just doing it at the right
Yeah.
time, that just helps a lot. And I'm glad that you highlighted that, because you can have an awesome, maybe if you had this idea, let's say 10 years ago, or maybe let's say back in 2005 or 2010, would it have taken off the same way it took off?
It's so
Um,
hard to know because part of the issues I have at the moment is I am constantly waiting for innovations and products to use for events. And some of the things I want to use, I think don't exist yet. For example, a lot of larger events use graphics, display, branding materials, signage. You see it when you go to event, the big
so,
signs and that kind of thing. And it's really difficult and quite expensive at the moment to use non-plastic alternatives, for example. So 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that would have been impossible. And maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, it'll be much easier to find alternatives. So I
right,
don't know 10 years ago, if I'd been 10 years earlier, what the outcome might have been. There are
that's
pros and cons either way.
and so when you got this first tender, so you're alone, like you're a solo founder. Did you pull it off all on your own, or did you have a team that you sort of built?
So,
Yeah,
so then I realized, oh wow, I've got some work. So then I quickly had to to find a way to deliver it. So yeah, I did a lot on my own at first, as you do, and eventually I was able to well, I suppose if you speak to anyone in my network, especially my friends and family, they'll all tell you they were part of the early legacy team because I basically co-opted everybody I knew into working
nice.
with me for the first few months. But then I realized I had to be a bit more professional because it was growing, and so that's where the team started to grow. But there's always that
And
tension, isn't there, between you need to be able to manage your finances, but also you need to be
yeah,
able to deliver a quality product. And so that balance of when you start to outsource and when you manage in-house is really difficult. I'm not sure even now I've perfected that balance.
nice. And so the event is over, the first event is over, and now there's sort of maybe some buzz generated, some word of mouth. What are uh, how did you market yourself? Like, you've done a couple of events. How do you sort of market yourself and make people
Mm.
aware? Just purely through word of mouth? Do you do something else as well?
It,
How do you?
it
Yeah.
was purely through word of mouth, and that's because, as I alluded to before, I feel like I'm terrible at marketing and PR. So
Right.
I don't or didn't, probably still don't have expertise in social media marketing or that kind of thing. So it was a lot through word of mouth. It helped that obviously an event is inherently a marketing device. And
Mhm.
so if you are holding events, people at your events might say, oh, I like the way you did this, and then approach you. But
Right.
early on, yeah, very, very little outbound marketing. Even now, we do very, very little outbound marketing, relatively
Right.
speaking.
Right. Right. Nice. And so, I mean, I want to know more about the sustainable, uh, the actual, the process of how you make an event sustainable, right? Because at Bill 3 itself, we do a lot of events, and we actually do a lot, we continuously do events, and we make it a point that as much as possible, we use sustainable, reusable materials, and, yeah, we try our best to do it. But so I wanted to know, like, what do you incorporate into your events to make it sustainable? And is there a delta, like a cost delta versus, let's say, if you conducted it sustainably versus if you didn't do it sustainably? Is there a massive cost delta? I just want to know more about that.
Yeah, such a great question. So, um, events really, like all with sustainability, it's really about how you plan and design your event right from the early stages to how you deliver and then how you clean up after yourself, that kind of post-event activity. And so at Legacy, we're really, really focused on the design of the event and also the supply chain, how you procure what you need for your event, because that's where a lot of the impact is. So we have 9 themes that we've come up with that we think represent the environmental and social issues to consider for an event. And the 9 themes cover issues like energy and carbon, so climate change, transport, materials and waste, food and drink, the community, so all the issues that are really relevant to people who gather. So what we do for all events is that all events start off with a sustainability plan, which is incorporated into the event plan. And each of those themes is considered for each event from the beginning. So as an example, we would say this event needs to minimize its carbon emissions by doing X, Y, and Z. And we're looking at F&B, food and beverages on this event by looking at X, Y, and Z. So that sustainability plan is for us as essential as the event schedule or the risk management plan. And we have regular meetings throughout that event cycle to review that sustainability plan, the way we would do with risk. So it's just embedded, it's not a separate thing at all. And then post-event as well, the same way you might do a post-event report, we will look through the plan and say, okay, what are our metrics here? There are a few fundamentals we always consider with events that help with the sustainability. One is the venue. If you can find a venue that's aligned or has those thinking, half of your battle is done. So we really try and work hard to liaise with venues or source venues that have that thinking in place, which is challenging for all kinds of reasons, but your venue is half the battle. And then probably another of the most visible aspects of an event in terms of sustainability is the waste. That's the bit we all see, especially for large events. You know, when you see how much has perhaps been thrown away, that can be demoralizing. So for us, it's very simple with materials and waste. We just say, if you procure anything on a legacy event, you need to say exactly what you're going to do with it afterwards. And just expecting event managers to consider that is transformative, because first of all, there's the question, well, do I need to buy this anyway? Because Abena is going to ask me what I'm going to do with it. So there's that consideration over whether you need to procure it in the first place, or can you hire it or rent it? Right. And then if you do procure it, if it's seen as necessary, you have to find a disposal route for it. So it's in your interest if you can dispose of it in a way that doesn't go to landfill. And I'm not saying that our events are perfect. Sometimes we do as much as we can, but I don't think we've ever run 100% sustainable event because there's so many issues. But I know that my event managers, if in the very rare instance something has to go to landfill, they will have tried as much as they can to avoid that, because they would have been questioned throughout that, and they'll have to report against it, and it's one of their metrics. So that kind of thinking throughout the cycle is, I think, really helpful in terms of making the event as low impact environmentally as possible. But in terms of the cost delta you mentioned, that is true. And the way we manage it is we just try and balance out our event design so that where we make savings in some areas, and that offsets perhaps the higher cost in other areas. So for an example, in our experience with F&B, food and drink, there's always too much food and drink on events. And that's because nobody wants to run out. Obviously, that's a disaster on an event if you run out, if your catering runs out. So what happens is the event manager slightly over caters, but then your catering company often also over caters because they're so worried they might run out. So you end up with this double whammy effect where you have far too much food and drink. So often what we do is we slightly under cater in terms of our numbers for catering. And what that means, that frees up a little bit of budget that can then be spent perhaps elsewhere. So it's just about managing all of the event costs to try and do that. And we do that across the board because A, we don't want waste, and B, we know that we need to compensate for the over procuring in other areas. And I have to say, I have never once ever got to a situation where I don't have enough food or drink or whatever on event. We've never run out, because this seems to be built in, especially around hosting and hospitality. So we
Right.
manage the delta by trying to be efficient in as much as we can in some ways to free up budget in other ways.
Right.
I hope that answers your question.
So just to sort of take this further, like, do you think we're at a place right now where, uh, like at any scale, at any event scale, are we at a place, or maybe this obviously I think dependent region by region, but at least in your region, are we at a place where we can, at any scale, at any event size, are we able to say that, hey, we can run this event sustainably and profitably? Like it doesn't have to be so costly to be sustainable.
um, I'm going to give you I feel like as a scientist, I can't ever say that we can 100% run every event 100% sustainably because that's not possible.
Right.
But absolutely, there's measures that can be taken on every event at every scale to
Right.
consider
It's
sustainability.
just the awareness that you are bringing in, where you, I love the fact that you said that, hey, we're pegging a metric to like the sustainability, like how efficiently are you using a material? Is it going to a landfill? You're actually tracking this, and you know it's a common thing in business. What gets uh, measured gets done, right? And you know, I love that's so it's just that, you know, plug in, have
It's,
do
it's not the tracking, it's the making people accountable for it. A lot of the issue around waste and events is that there's no one person accountable for disposing. It's possibly an issue of at a larger scale. You've got
right,
people responsible for delivering, but you don't have people responsible for the cleanup at the end. And so it's just completing that cycle so
right,
that the person who procures is also responsible for disposal. And that is where the power lies, giving that accountability.
right. And so, Arjun, I wanted to take you. Like I mentioned, we do a lot of events at Bill3, and this was actually a question when I was telling my colleague earlier. She does she worked previously at WeWork, and she ran a bunch of events, and she's doing a bunch of events here for us. And so, one question that she wanted me to ask you was uh, finding vendors that are value aligned and finding synergies between them. How do you actually do that? Because that was a struggle for her, a pain point. First of all, getting normal vendors and just having them efficiently produce on time, or you know, synergizing between them is a task. But you know, then having this layer of sustainability and stuff. So how did you manage to sort of work around that?
I suppose if I could plug legacy a little bit here. So we have exactly that problem. So we've set up a whole team, a whole work stream in legacy to deal with that sourcing of sustainable vendors and contractors. So we have a part of the business called Legacy Marketplace.
Yeah,
And the aim, that's all they do. They're about they help people source sustainable events
right,
contractors.
right.
And if you don't use Legacy Marketplace, it's tough. And some expertise to be able to understand the the verifications and the accreditations that different contractors have in different regions. And so, yeah, it's possible, but it's challenging, I think. So, yeah, that's part of one of our service offerings to try and help people in the sector navigate that minefield.
And so was it like a process of you educating like conventional vendors, or did you actually go out of your way to search for vendors that were value aligned? And was it the latter, or was it
It
okay?
was the latter because part of what we do as legacy, we want to make events sustainable, but also the social side of events. We want events to be equitable as well. And
Right,
so we want to champion some of those smaller businesses who are not able to compete with some of the larger global companies because they just don't have that budget or presence. So we typically go out of our way to source smaller companies, often not for profits, often social enterprises who
right.
wouldn't normally have that opportunity. And we're really
And
proud, actually. We've had some wonderful stories where we've been able to introduce companies into a corporate supply chain where they've really thrived.
oh, I actually would like to hear more about that. How did, like, what was the change that you got out? Yeah,
Oh gosh, so a couple of examples, I suppose. So for some of the events we run in Europe, we um some of our corporates wanted to provide a gift that was meaningful. And realistically, they were going to provide some kind of gift. I know very well that the most sustainable option is not to provide anything physical, but I also know there are reasons why human beings give gifts. And so it's an uphill battle to try and stop the gifting process. So anyway, we had been working with a social enterprise based in Northern Ireland, and they train up people with learning difficulties and autism to make mugs. So to do pottery, to make these beautiful mugs, and they make them in different colors. And because they're handmade, the mugs can have a logo in them. So our clients absolutely adore these mugs to the point where the teams collect the mugs in different colors. So this small little social enterprise in Northern Ireland had not been working with these big companies. They've just been working with their local neighborhoods. But now they're in the supply chain of quite a few companies, and it's allowed them to expand, to build another pottery facility, and to just really showcase what they do. So now, yeah, they've been able to do a lot of good work because of because we introduced their mugs to this corporate. And another I suppose similar example is we had a company that was working globally, and they were using these items that were breakable. Well, they were using plastic items. So we suggested an option that was more fragile, and they were worried that they wouldn't be able to send these around the world using the paper bubble wrap that we suggested, because they just thought they had to use plastic bubble wrap. So we said, no, we have this paper-based honeycomb wrap. Look, we'll do it, we'll trial it for you. So we showed them that we could send these items using the paper honeycomb, and it worked. Obviously, we knew because we've done it, and we've done it for a while, and it convinced this company. And so now they're able to use, now they send using this sort of paper honeycomb wrap provided by a smaller business rather than plastic bubble wrap. And so that's a really small example, but actually that example of substituting their plastic bubble wrap, of which they were using huge quantities, for paper honeycomb wrap, would save so much wastage in lots of ways. And so those kind of examples for us are really heartwarming and make it make what we do beneficial, where we can make changes like that.
That's awesome. And it seems to me that the more events you do, it's sort of a snowball effect. The knowledge that stacks up and the vendors that you work with that stack up after each event, it sort of acts as a protective moat for your business in of itself, because the type of connections and the collaborations and the knowledge that you guys have in legacy events, it's not easily replicable by another company, right? And so how did you go from how did you sort of decide that, hey, if I what knowledge should I stack on, and what sort of branch should I diversify in to sort of make my offering so unique that legacy event stands out? Did that happen naturally, or did it was there thought behind that?
It just happened. It just happened naturally. I mean, it seems ridiculous in this day and age, and quite sad, that there aren't many companies that specialize in events and sustainability still. We're still quite a rare offering. It's getting better. There are other companies, and I don't mind competitors at all in this space. There are plenty of events, and it's good for people to be talking. So there are some companies emerging. In a way, some of it came from just trying to solve our own problems. Like you mentioned, your colleague was struggling to find vendors, so were we. And so we thought, well, if we can come up with a system that will help us find vendors, and we can help other people find vendors, then that's a win-win. So that's really where Marketplace came from. The fact that we knew the supply chain was a big part of the sustainable event, and we were struggling ourselves. And then in terms of consultancy, well, we were having to educate clients anyway on events, because we needed to explain why we were taking the actions we were doing. And so we thought, well, why don't we offer a training service then, since this is clearly necessary in the industry? And so it came from there, and that's how we ended up doing quite a lot of consultancy, just because of the need to explain the thinking that we were taking on events. So it's sort of evolved naturally, I suppose. We didn't, I'm trying to think, I don't think consciously we've ever decided to launch a product into the market because for the product's sake, if it's not a problem we had ourselves.
Right, right. Interesting. And so the what was an event that you were especially proud of? Like your most
Oh,
innovative event, and just something that you were really proud of pulling off.
it's
And
not going to be it's not going to be what you think. It's not a flashy one. The
yeah,
events I'm most proud of actually is well, the achievements I'm most proud of is I've had a couple of clients where it's been quite challenging at the beginning to convince them or explain to them why we've taken the decisions we have. But later on, I found out that, or the client has told me that they've gone to another event, another organized event, and basically pestered them about some of the stuff they've seen at the event. And
yeah.
so I feel, wow, if I'm creating an army of really clients who are very
Like,
fussy.
it's like just proliferating, you're just having champions in
Exactly.
our company. That's awesome. Oh,
That's the thing that thrills my heart. If my client has gone to someone else's event and made a complete pain of themselves, questioning why there's things wrapped in plastic, then I feel my job is done. So,
oh, that's
so it's not a specific event. But if I had to try to think of a specific event that I've been really proud of, we did one a few years ago now. It was pre-COVID. And it was a stakeholder engagement event for the local community to see what their thoughts were on a sustainable development that was being built near them of new housing and that kind of thing. And typically, the way stakeholder engagement happens in the UK, where we're based, is a developer might hire a space in the library or a room in the town hall and invite people to come and look at very dry, dusty documents. It's quite a dry process. It's
right.
not very active, only the very, very dedicated turn out. But for this particular project, we thought, well, why don't we make this an event that people actually want to come to, and then they'll find the stakeholder engagement easier. So we basically developed a small festival for this developer in a field, and the field had no infrastructure. So that really gave me an opportunity to bring in my renewable energy knowledge. So we were able to power this festival using a solar
Wow.
powered stage, and we were able to bring in our sustainable temporary toilets as well that were zero water use. And so because it was a field, it was a really great opportunity to trial lots of technologies that clients are often reluctant to do. So that one was great because it felt like from scratch we created this occasion, this gathering that used at the time the cutting edge technologies and was a bit different from the norm. So that was a nice experience to be part of.
That's awesome. So, Abin, are you worried? You mentioned initially that the first set of customers that you worked with were people who are really passionate about sustainability. They were aware. Are you worried that, like, as obviously you work with brilliant companies, have checked, brilliant organizations have checked the website and so. Are you worried that as you get more famous and this need for being sustainable grows and it's already growing? Like, what are your thoughts on greenwashing? Like, what are your thoughts on companies using your services and trying to portray a sustainable front when they're actually not? Like, and how do you deal with that personally and on a company level? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, I could chat to you for another few hours just on
Yeah,
this subject. It's really difficult as an area as we all become more aware and we all
yeah.
realize that I suppose what you'd call the green pound
Mm.
exists. It's a real challenge, and my team
It's
and I grapple with this all the time in terms of who should we work for. It's I think it's quite easy to decide who you're not going to work for.
yeah.
And for us, generally, I can't imagine Legacy working with an arms company, as an example, and that doesn't feel like a difficult ethical decision to make. So it's not that. It's more the companies where you feel,
Dicey.
yeah, that exactly where it's a lot more grey in terms of what they're doing and why they want to use Legacy. And as we've grown bigger, my team is excellent. So sometimes often we're approached to organize events because we've been recommended as excellent event managers. So the client actually doesn't have an interest in sustainability at all.
Right.
And so there have been situations where we're talking about our method and the client really isn't interested. They just want their event delivered. And so then, you have
Right.
conversations around, why are you doing this? I just want my event. So that's one. And then, as you'll know, with what you do, there are very many accreditations and verifications and badges to demonstrate sustainability, and no one can be an expert in all of them. And so, yeah, navigating that is a challenge. I don't have an answer over
Yeah.
that, but it's constantly grappling. Is this progressing our mission, which is about events? So
Yeah.
does it matter if this company does this if their event presence is improved? It's a really difficult one. I don't know
Yeah. Do you
the
have a
answer. There
do you
is an
have
answer.
do you have a personal sort of does your team, like when let's say a company which is dicey appears, like, and they want to do an event with you, how do you and your team sort of, is there a question that you sort of answer collectively that, hey, we need to do this because of so and so, or is there, how do you I think this is a classic example of you balancing your values and profitability, and being sort of in
Mhm.
that. How do you sort of deal with that? Because I think a lot of our audience wants to
We
they
always do due diligence on a client to understand exactly what they're doing. Where that might raise an issue, we generally have a chat with the senior members of the team about what those issues might be. So we go through a series of questions then. And there have been occasions where we have turned down a client because we're not comfortable that we either understand
Hmm,
what it is their objectives are, or we feel that they're with working with them is not going to further our mission.
right,
So it's quite an informal process. But yeah, where we've done due diligence on a client and it's rung some alarm bells, then we will have that discussion
right,
internally.
nice. And what was an event that sort of didn't go according to plan? Because that teaches you a lot as well. uh, I think there might have been one or two. What was something that stood out, and what did you learn from it? What was it?
Yeah, great question. I think what draws me to events, I mean, as well as loving events, events really are problem solving.
Yeah.
It's someone gives you a brief, so a set of challenges and a budget, and says, solve this for me, please, in a
Mhm.
way that's invisible. So that no one knows that any work has been done.
Yeah.
That's the challenge for us in events, and we love that. And
Yeah.
so sometimes that set of criteria has been impossible, but we still rise to it. So we've had occasions, some at the beginning when I was very naive. So one example might be right at the beginning when I started Legacy, I think it was back in 2016. Um, a client came to me with a very short turnaround for a business event. And so I was working in a part of the country in the UK that I wasn't familiar with. And a venue approached me called the Green Centre. And I possibly didn't do as much due diligence as I should have done because they were called the Green Centre because they had solar panels on site. However, their other operations really weren't sustainable at all. And so, because I hadn't done my research properly at that point, I ended up with an event where there were items wrapped in single use plastic, for example, just
Right.
other issues that I should have been more on top of. So very early on, I learned that just because somewhere is called the Green Centre or they imply they're sustainable, you really have to do your research. And then, oh gosh, I have so many stories. I'm trying to think what I can talk about in terms of event stories. I'm sure we all have some. I remember
Yeah.
the one I told you about the field. We had another event that same summer, and we were having a heat wave in the UK. And it was, I know in Goa this won't sound hot to you, but at the time it was 36 degrees in the UK, which for us is hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were organizing a festival and the client hadn't cleared the site for the festival. So when we came to the site, it was a heat waves, it was really difficult working conditions, and my site wasn't clear, so I couldn't set up the site. And
Oh,
so
right.
a lot of last minute bartering with various farm staff to try and procure equipment to clear the site. So that's what I mean by sometimes the challenges are really quite surreal. And then quite recently we had, I don't know if this is occurring in Goa, but at the moment, pertinent to your point about greenwashing, there are quite a few events at the moment which are attracting attention from activists and protesters, such
Yeah.
as Just Stop Oil or
Mm,
Extinction Rebellion or other groups. And so a few times on an event I've been running, perhaps a sponsor or a speaker has been invited by a client who has attracted attention because they are high profile uh, and seem to be not adhering to the values of sustainability. So in terms of the challenges, that's one. What if
yeah.
I'm running an event for a client and my client invites a speaker that
Yeah.
is not aligned with those goals? And so managing those kind of client expectations and managing events which might attract attention and perhaps activism, it is always difficult as an events manager, especially in a field that where you're presumably on the same side as the activists and say,
Right, right,
so
right. That's actually that's yeah, that's actually tough. Like I relate to you, but I'm also doing this. That conflict definitely uh, does exist. And yeah, I love asking founders this question because like people who are building for profit and purpose, because uh, it's almost like walking a tightrope, right? On one hand, you need to make the company financially sustainable because that allows you to keep doing the good work. But there are some tough calls that you need to make to be value aligned, which that's something always interesting. And so, Abin, I'm wondering if you're comfortable talking about revenue numbers and how's your revenue been year on year? Is that something you're comfortable? Because I'm sure a lot of people would love to know how you.
can you repeat the question? So
So, Arvind, I was just wondering if you're comfortable talking about revenue numbers and just in terms of how the company has been growing and the type of growth that you've seen in legacy events. Because I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this are very excited to sort of see that it's actually possible to build a sustainable events company, like profitably. So I think if you could share some data on that, that'd be awesome.
I can do my best. I should start off by saying I made a very deliberate decision at the beginning for Legacy to be a for-profit company. The reason I was intentional about that is I think in order to create the wide-scale change that we need, businesses with sustainability and purpose at heart need to be on the same level footing as what I'll call other businesses.
Yeah.
And you're running as a not-for-profit, you are not on the same level footing. So it's just, for me, I'm interested in wide scale change. And so business has to change. And so I want to demonstrate that a business can do that. Um, in terms of profitability, I feel like as an events business, we've gone through a quite unique time. And so I don't know how representative our experience is or will be, but I can tell you that through COVID, we really struggled, obviously, because the sector was closed down. Luckily for us, we've been talking about online events for a long time because they're more sustainable. Not every event, love in-person events, but not every event needs everybody to attend in person. And so clients, we were top of mind for clients when the world shut down. And so we were able to run a lot of online events. And also because we have different work streams, we do a lot of consultancy, we have our sourcing platform, that gives us a diverse income. But we definitely struggled through the the COVID pandemic years. Coming out, the events business was booming. So we had a really great year after COVID. And then for us, we've really struggled the last, I suppose, 18 months, because I think especially in events and in Europe, through the COVID times were difficult, but there was support available. Whereas, as you'll know, the global economy has gone through challenging times in the last 18 months for all kinds of reasons, war, resources, climate change, whatever it is. And so at the moment we're finding it challenging, but we do have these diverse income streams. So yeah, we'll be okay, but it's not the boom years at the moment. I hope that
Um,
answers your question.
Yeah, that sort of gives me a direction. Are you comfortable sharing a number, or is that
I'd rather not share numbers, but I can say that for the events business, the numbers can be misleading because the business model for organizing events is essentially you're assigned a budget by a client
Right,
and then use that to deliver the event. And so for an events company, often their revenue is much, much higher seemingly than
right.
other business models. So
That,
yeah, we see this, we have a very healthy turnover, but you have to realize that reflects the business model.
um,
But yeah, so but I'd rather not share specific numbers.
that makes sense. That makes sense. And so I wanted to know more about like what is now your journey from now. Let's say I love that you said that. we- I love that you made a statement that we are for profit because we want to be at that same level of other companies and what we want to sort of be at scale. So what is your sort of vision ahead? Let's say for the next 5 to 10 years for
Yeah,
legacy.
I think for us, the next 5, 10 years is really to just be able to manage the entire event cycle in legacy and be the first port of call for anyone who is thinking about considering sustainability. So whether it's that they need a vendor or they need some advice or they need some assistance with their event, we want to really just be top of mind for that potential client. So for us, it's just growing our presence and doing more of that marketing and PR that I
Right.
mentioned earlier, which is a
Right.
whole new area for us.
Would-
So just continuing to grow,
Right.
ride out the current challenging economic conditions, and
And
really make a name for what we do.
would you say that's the biggest challenge right now? Just getting your word out there, just showing people the good work.
Yeah, it's the biggest challenge for us. Being visible is our biggest challenge. Um, it's an internal joke that for us that our internal motto should be, I wish I'd found you earlier. That's what clients say to us all the time. And so
Right.
we're not making our presence known
Yeah,
enough. So
enough.
that for us is
People,
yeah, we're fortunate that for most businesses that's an early it's a challenge they solve very early,
yeah.
and we still are grappling with that. But yeah, just making ourselves more visible, I think, is our next goal.
I think that's similar with what we do at Bill 3 because I think our product is really good. Like all the people love what we do. I think right now it's just about not being shy and going out there and showing people in a creative way about what we're actually trying to do and make that change. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So I've
Yeah,
been
I
this
think Build 3 is such a great product. And because I suppose you're working globally, that challenge is even harder because
yeah,
you're making yourself visible to the whole world.
exactly. I I've been if you're ever in India, please do visit us. I would love to share your experience with everyone here. But yeah, I think getting I think we're seeing that change in India in a positive way, where a lot of people are trying to build for purpose as well, like in profitable ways. So I'm super excited about the time, especially in an Indian context. This decade, everyone talks about world's largest, fastest growing economy and stuff like that. I think obviously there are a lot of challenges to be solved in India, but I think we're going in the right direction. And it's heartening to see also that there are people who actually believe in this, that people are
Yeah,
their way
no, definitely. Yeah. I think there's so much potential in India for my industry for events because Um,
big
India
fat
is known for hosting some of the world's most incredible gatherings and experiences. You could arguably the best in the world.
yeah,
And so this whole area of how do you bring people together in a responsible way, I feel that India will pioneer.
and
Absolutely.
hope maybe you can lead the charge eventually. You're coming to India, sort of partnering with someone, so that would be exciting as well.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. I'd love to. I think it's a really exciting time. And like you said, there are many projects coming out of India all around the country, around in all kinds of areas, tech and events. And yeah, it's an exciting time, I think, especially with the potential of the workforce and the skills of the workforce and that proximity to Asia Pacific,
Yeah,
that
that
it's exciting time.
Abin, this was really great. Thank you so much for your time. We're closing in on our the interview, and I think for me, I loved how, for me, what's always exciting is how a founder is almost like he or she stumbles upon the idea because
Mhm.
of their past experiences. And I think your journey was a clear example of that, where you sort of married the two, where you were really knowledgeable about sustainability, and you always had events, and you sort of like, hey, I see that that's a great way to promote sustainability, and I love that you sort of threaded the needle and just started from there. Uh, and that was super inspiring to sort of know more about that. I just want to know, how did you think, what did you think about the interviews? What are your thoughts about it?
Oh, I thought, well, you're very personable and easy to talk to, so
Thank
that's
you so
great.
much.
I, I I don't know. I mean, you know your audience. I would have liked to hear more about what you do. So I feel like you should have asked more questions that
Yeah.
you could explain
So,
your what you do and things. Because you clearly have such an interesting viewpoint as well, and you speak to so many founders. So yeah,
yeah.
I would have
So,
liked to hear more about you.
so what I do primarily is around marketing, communications, a little bit of sales as well.
Mhm.
So I actually graduated 2 years ago from a liberal arts college in India, and I was looking. So I grew up in Dubai, actually. Uh,
Okay.
so I grew up in Dubai. I did my schooling over there up till high school, and then I did university in India. But so when my family is still in Dubai, so I was actually I didn't resonate with the culture uh, in Dubai. I thought it was too materialistic, too flashy, not for me. And I was always looking for
Mhm.
things that I wanted to do. And so that's when Bill 3, the company that I'm working about, actually just like popped up on a university WhatsApp message. It was not a job opening or anything. It was just their website, and that's how I sort of applied, and I just stuck. I just stayed with the company for like the past 2 3 years because it was just amazing, the work
Yeah.
that they're doing. So that's my journey, and I love talking to founders because I love that there's that special passion, and there's that I love that threading the needle moments that people have, and how did they start, how it just started from like a mini sort of idea, and then it just snowballs into something awesome, and that's been my journey. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And do you think, because I don't think you could get further from Dubai in Goa, that's
Yeah,
really the other, I mean, in terms
yeah.
of values.
It,
So
it's
do you feel Goa is more aligned
oh
with
yeah.
who you
You
are?
know, the place where I am, there's a lot of people from the UK that actually come stay during the winters, because I think it just works out weather-wise. I think in the UK, during the winters, it's
Weather-wise and financially, there are lots of benefits
oh
as
yeah,
well to being in
exactly.
Dubai. Yes.
Exactly. So a lot of people come to Goa during the winters, and yeah, my parents. So my this is funny because when my mom came to see the company, well, like the place where I'm working, it's a beach villa, right? And so she's used to seeing these glass buildings on the
Yeah.
highway, and then she's looking at this. I'm like, she was like, what is happening here? What's the scene? Where are the glass buildings? Where are these offices?
Yes.
And so I had to explain to her, like, we're trying to do something different. So that was an interesting journey. But I think from like a young age, I think I knew in my heart that I needed to do something different, and I needed to do something that I could actually put my heart and mind behind. And I think I was fortunate enough to sort of come across the three, sort of aligns with my spiritual goals as well, and just a lot of uh, in in uh, in in Hinduism, you have this term called karma yoga, which is your working using your work as a form of getting progressing spiritually, right? And I feel like the work that I do sort of aligns with that. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey in that aspect. Yeah.
So have you ever had founders apply that your act I'm not sure what you're doing is right for this community? Have you ever had that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. like loads of times. We actually did get someone, I think, in the arm space apply. uh,
Really?
like,
You
yeah, yeah,
applied to your community? Oh wow.
and obviously we rejected it, and so there are clear what do you call times when there are, like you mentioned, there are times where it's sort of dicey, where you're like, hey, are they actually doing something that we can consider and go for? But at times it's just really easy. But I
Yeah.
think that the rate of people applying who are like actually value aligned is higher than the rate of people who are not value aligned. So I
Okay.
think,
That's good.
yeah, so
How do
that's
you do it? Do you have formal KPIs that you use, or do you have a chat? How do you try and judge if this startup is right for you?
so we actually have a, similar to sort of Y Combinator. We have three sort of rounds of applications where there's a
Mm.
short form where people talk about what their past experience has been, and just their sort of why do they care about sustainability, and uh, what are their thoughts on impact. So that acts as a first filter, and then the second round we get really deep into what they actually think, what are their motivations, what are their skill sets. uh, Sorry, just give me a second. I'm just going to connect my charger.
Mm.
And so then we have a third round where we actually talk. We have a third round where we actually get on a video interview with founders, where we sort of
Yeah.
really try to understand them as best as we can. It's not a perfect process, but as best as we can, uh, as a person, right? And so what we do is I think in a startup there are three types of personalities and work types that you sort of need in the initial days. It's your hacker, hipster, hustler. Your hacker is a person who sort of builds the product. Your hustler
Mm.
is a person who sort of creates a business model and sort of finds ways to make money out of the product. And your hipster is a person who sort of adds the aesthetics, adds the stickiness
Yeah.
to your product or service. And I think if you
I love
get these
that.
three,
Hackster, hustler, and hipster. Yeah.
and we try as much as possible to get an equal balance in our cohorts. So there's a lot of chance to actually form teams that have a high rate of success, because at least what we think is the founders or the co-founders have to be able to reach product market fit without any other employee.
Yeah.
uh, that's what we think. And then so we try as best as possible to create a community experience and get the right people, and
Okay. And it's
that's
Y Combinator kind of an inspiration to you to do that.
yeah. So we had Y Combinator as an inspiration, we had Antler as an inspiration.
Mm.
So a bunch of these organizations that we sort of modeled after, and we modeled our program by introducing
Hmm.
our unique twists to the program, and and also we try to get since we are there's a benefit of being in Goa, because there's a lot of people who come from like smart people, tech people, and all these people, they come to Goa to vacation. And so when you tell them, hey, come vacation, but also interact with our founders, so we get a lot of really smart, accomplished people come visit our space, give talks, mentor our founders. So that's something that we do.
Yeah. Ah, so interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
I love it. This was great. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? This is a completely left field question, so hopefully it won't take too much of your time. But I have a friend who's worked in sustainability for many years,
Yeah.
and he's identified that perhaps some of the barriers to change is that people at the top, inside corporates, often people in the kind of senior leadership team, so running functions, are not fully engaged in this. So he's trying to establish if he could set up some kind of center or retreat where
Oh,
you
okay.
isolate people exactly from their day to day. And then I call it colloquially the kind of brainwashing, but basically you isolate them and you give them an environment where they can really kind of think about these issues, and hopefully they'll take that back to their day to day work. So
That's
I guess what I'm asking is, what are your thoughts, A, and how do you get those people onto a program, B?
I mean, this is quite serendipitous because we actually, while our accelerator is our flagship product, we also run retreats at our space. We have places
Ah,
for people. Our space is open for people to run retreats. We have places for people to live. We take care of the food, and so we run a retreat for people who want to know more about startup fundamentals and want to know what it takes to build a startup. So we currently run that, and I think running a retreat is a great way to sort of bring about change in a very compressed time frame, because you're going you have mind space, right? You're leaving your regular life and you're coming to a place where you can sort of think about stuff differently. I think that model, as we're exploring it, seems very powerful as well, to sort of get people more
yeah.
aware.
But I think so for me, that's where the issue is. A lot of the people who probably need a retreat are the people in much more normal jobs. They're not the personality types to start something or to be entrepreneurs. They're the opposite personality type.
Correct.
And they're not really, they have a lot invested in not actually upsetting the status quo too
Mm.
much because
Mm-hmm.
they value stability and other factors. So how do you attract those people to a retreat? Those are possibly the ones who need it the most. But how
Right.
do you attract those people to a retreat? What can you offer them? If
Like,
you have a very high status job and you work many, many hours a week, and
right.
for a company that doesn't leave you much thinking time,
Yeah.
and sustainability isn't really one of your core
Right.
one of the core objectives in your role, how do you
Right.
get that person to a
That,
retreat and go?
that that's actually interesting. So we're actually experiment. Like the retreat model that we're doing is primarily B2C, but we're actually experimenting with B2B, where we're sort of making the case to, let's say, a company that's recently been funded, let's say Series A, and they want their managers, their second in command or third in command, to act as owners of their work. So we're trying to sort of pitch that product as a as a as a as a upskilling feature for their managers, where they sort of make it seem like, hey, if you send your managers who you see potential and you see prospects, this is sort of a way for them to upskill and actually embrace these entrepreneurial elements, so they can come up with revenue streams on their own and be full stack as employees, right? And so that's how we are looking at it. But honestly, right now, we're still in the experimenting mode. We're not really sure how this will work out. Yeah,
Oh, that's an interesting nugget, though.
yeah,
That's completely. So, if you can make it a bit competitive by kind of implying that somebody has nominated that
yeah,
company on
exactly,
the
exactly.
retreat,
Like,
then
you can,
self.
exactly. You're not targeting the employee directly. You're actually targeting the CXO level people to send their second in command. At least that's what we're thinking about doing.
Well, he doesn't want the second in command. He wants the CXO.
He
But
wants a
yeah,
CXO. So then the CXO, if you ask me personally, then what would really attract the CXO is other CXOs who are going to be joining the retreat, and
yeah,
that
that's what
that,
I
that
think. It needs to be a inclusive status thing.
exactly, it has to be like you're part of the club, you know that
That's what I think. I don't think marketing as a retreat will attract that level because they don't have
yeah,
time and they don't really care. It needs to be some kind of peer
because
acceptance.
these people, like, they want to connect with, I feel like they want to share insights. I've always thought that people, like, especially when you're deep into a discipline, there are like these insights that you want to share amongst your peers and gain also from your peers. And
Yeah,
creating a platform for that, like in like where they when they come in first, I think it would be like offline, if sorry, online, where you sort of drive that interest, and then you sort of upsell it with an offline experience where you're getting people together. I think that can be very interesting. That is something super interesting.
I'm gonna just use names to make sure I understand your point. I am not talking about these companies. I'm just assigning random names.
Yeah,
But let's say, for example, CXO in Amazon
yeah.
somehow nominates CXO and Unilever. So
That,
somehow CXO and Unilever says your peers, companies one, two, three, think you should go on. Do you think is that the way or no?
yeah. So I would. So you're saying like let's say an Amazon CXO sort of says that, hey, I'm part of this club.
How do you get
Uh,
the Amazon CXO? Kind of peer pressure can you put on the Amazon CXO to come to something like this?
so I think Evan, it will be something similar to how you started, where you leverage your network. I feel like that would
Mhm.
be like if you have CXO level people in your network, you start a chain, and when you start the chain, you make it very visible.
But I can only sell to the people that are interested in sustainability. That's the problem because all of my network are interested because of who I am. I generally
Right.
don't have people in my network who are like, burn, baby, burn the planet, burn. So I
Correct.
can't reach, so I don't know how to reach the ones who don't have any interest in sustainability.
There was no CXO level person who was interested in sustainability in the events that you sort of
Oh, I'm
organized?
sure, but oh yeah, I'm sure. So all talking about the big companies, they've all got their sustainability people,
Yeah,
absolutely. And they've all
yeah,
got people who have a nominal interest, but the
yeah,
people who are actually running things
yeah.
are not don't care enough about sustainability in terms of their
People-
list of priorities of what
They
to
have to
do.
meet
And
keeping
they're the
them.
ones who need to change. Yeah, the sustainability people don't need to change. It's like the CMO or the COO or the risk officer or the legal person. Those are the ones who need the retreats. But how do you get to them? Because sustainability won't attract them. Because they'll say, I've got someone else in my company who deals with the green stuff. Why do I need to go?
100. So I think that now I see. So then I would not highlight the sustainability angle first. I would highlight the networking aspect, right? I would highlight the
Yeah.
fun, like you bring fun to your events, you bring joy to your events. I would highlight that, and I would make it exclusive to CXO level. It's invite only. And then I would weave sustainability into, like, I'm sure you guys know, crack that, how you weave sustainability into your
Yeah, that's
event.
what I think. It's not me, by the way, but my friend is doing it. And I completely agree. I think he's
Yeah,
very passionate about the sustainability, but I feel cynically that that's not
yeah,
going to the people
yeah.
who he would attract with that are not the people who need to hear the message.
Yeah, yeah. And it's there was another founder who I was talking to, and he said something very right. He said the 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 fact that we are sustainable, we don't put that cost on our customer. We deliver a quality product to our customer, and then we weave sustainability around it, because being sustainable is for us. Like, we know the impact that it generates for the planet, but we don't sort of put that on the customer by giving them a sort of a shoddy product, right? They make the product really awesome. And I think if you make that event really awesome for these CXO level people, where they're really excited about
Yeah.
just that fact that, oh shit, I'm going to actually interact with other people and share these tips and knowledge and stuff, and then you weave it in there's some sort of serendipitous change that can happen during the retreat, where the sustainability sort of weaved in. I think that's the way to go. And I think you're right. Just by saying that this is sustainability retreat is not going to attract them, because they have to
No,
also maintain those balance sheets and all that. It's just hard.
I know that's lots of food for thought.
Yeah.
Okay, I
But
feel like I take your time, but what you've
I hope
so
this
you've
was.
given me ideas. So when I talk to my friend, he it sounds like he basically needs to create something like TED Talks for retreats.
that that could be interesting. I mean,
Like the original TED Talk, not TEDx, but the
not
original TED. Very
not
exclusive. Only a few people know about it.
exactly. Invite only. Important. Invite only.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
In,
that's great insights. I'll have a chat with him and see. But
yeah,
yeah, that's it's
that's all.
useful to be able to pick your brain. Thank you.
Hey, that's no issue. I'm glad I was useful. Yeah, please feel free to reach out whenever. I'd be happy to. If in my network I know some people who I can help your friend also, or you, whatever request you have, just feel free to reach out. Try with the best
Thank
of my
you, and
ability.
likewise.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great, Adam. Thank you so much for giving me your time.